Please welcome to the stage Angel Gregorio, owner of the Spice Suite at Black and Forth. Aaron Smith, head of market commentary at Citibank.
Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever all of you are. So happy to have you here for this conversation. Really excited today to be speaking on behalf of Citi and sponsoring this panel with the Executive Leadership Council. We'll be talking about a lot of different topics. We will also have a room for Q&A at the end, so we'll be able to jump in at that point as well. My name is Aaron Smith. I work for Citi within the Global Markets Division, which is essentially sales and trading of fixed income and equity products to institutional investors around the world. Within that division, I run our content for client-facing content called Market Commentary, which we deliver through digital channels for clients that we serve. So, for that reason, my career was born and, has been over the last 15 years embraced in digital and innovation. So that's why this topic is really important to me. And also, from the perspective of ELC and what it does for Black professionals across this country and the conversations that we have here and the conversations that we have in our own communities, really knowing the importance of having them being together. And really figuring out what's the best way to bring our best selves to work and also to showcase that. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Angel Gregorio, who's the owner of the Spice Suite and Black and Forth. I love her tag, Food is Fashion. I know that everyone has been able to review her bio, but I would like Angel in her own words to tell us a little bit about her story, how she came here, and just, finding and embracing and really rejoicing in the successes that she's had.
Peace, guys. So I am a DC native, Howard University graduate twice. So that means they got all of my money. And I was majoring in counseling psychology. And I thought that I wanted to be a psychologist or work with young people who've been impacted by mass incarceration through counseling and therapy. So I got my first job maybe 13 or 14 years ago, if not longer, at a youth jail. And I thought that I would start out there and work my way into being a school psychologist. I ended up becoming a teacher. I got certified to teach and became a teacher, then went on to do a bunch of work in like youth violence intervention and education. And then life got even crazier because I was walking down the street one day and I saw this for lease sign on this random building. And I called the landlord to ask what the rent would be. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with the space. I was really just curious about what the rent would be on this commercial property in a neighborhood not too far from where I grew up. And when I called the landlord, like any good landlord had natural questions like, what do you want to do with the space? And I was like, I have no idea. I just want to know the rent. I thought it was like an apartment where you just call and they tell you how much it would be. And when he asked me what I would do over and over again, I just kind of gave in and was like, sir, I will open a spice shop. Can you tell me the price? And then my life changed dramatically and I became a spice girl. So now I spend my time traveling the world for spices and spice inspiration, and have converted this space from a spice shop to a dream incubator and now a mini strip mall in Northeast DC.
In that time frame and the story and building the business, is there one specific thing that sticks out to you that you're most proud of being able to accomplish?
I think the thing that probably two things, right? Like the things that I'm most proud to be able to accomplish are one, being able to create a legacy for my children, right? Through owning commercial property. Because when I first started out, I was just renting a space. Now I own commercial property in DC. And that's not something I grew up with. Like I did not grow up with legacy. I did not grow up with any sort of inheritance or trust fund, life insurance. None of the things that we think should be standard in how we raise our children are not what I kind of inherited from my family. I inherited a lot of trauma from my family and things that, said that I shouldn't be who I am. So I'm really proud to be able to have overcome that. But I'm also equally proud to have converted this space into, what I said in my intro is a dream incubator. While, folks come to me for spices because our spices are amazing and our sauces and honeys and all the things, but knowing the platform that we give to other Black business owners to be able to pop up and sell their products and have hosted thousands at this point of pop-up shops for free is something that I'm extremely proud of.
And I love the word dream incubator. And I think before we start in talking a little bit more, I just want to kind of level set with some definitions and kind of for everyone listening, think of that dream incubator. So I'll get those up on the screen. Okay, so it looks like we have a little delay in getting that slide up, but essentially, we're here to say an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur's guide to leading with innovation. And what's really cool about today, we're operating in Black as Black professionals, looking to further support our community. So the three words that I'd like you to kind of think about today is innovation, what it means, right? Implementing new processes, new ideas, new methods to really evolve. And then the difference between entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, because entrepreneurship we're all probably more familiar with, right? You develop, you organize, you run your own new business like Angel here, and you're taking on a lot of risk with that, which can be kind of scary, but can also, be very rewarding, and especially when we're talking about the legacy that you can lead. But in the same or similar vein, you can also do intrapreneurship, which is entrepreneurship inside of a large organization. And there's no right or wrong answer here. We're going to talk to both of those today. Maybe you'll discover that that fits in your life some kind of way, and it can be more a part of your story. So we'll get back to the main event so that we've gone through that. So ELC really values these 4 A's. And what that is just key factors that, is believed to really be central to Black professionals having success in corporate America. So what are the 4 A's? Assignments, alignments, ability, and attitude. So based on your experience, Angel, how did those A's play a part in your entrepreneurial path and success?
I think when I think about those, right, like having heard those for the first time and trying to remember them in my answer, I'm thinking that what stands out to me is recognizing that they might not all be present at the same time, right? Like I started off with the right attitude, which was this like desire to take risks and do something interesting and fun and different and leave education, right? So the attitude was there. The alignment for me is the thing that kind of came later and really organically, and I'm grateful for that. So me being able to open my space to other Black business owners, me now creating this kind of mini strip mall in DC, and being able to continue to serve community in the ways that I've always wanted to. Because when I started out on my journey in particular, I felt some apprehension because I've always worked in a space where I was serving, and it was very clear that it was purposeful work, right? Like I was an educator and an assistant principal. I worked in youth violence intervention. I worked for a nonprofit. So that is like, duh, like you're doing, hard work, like you're doing what you're supposed to do. But when I moved into owning the Spice Suite, it was like, is retail really purposeful? Like, am I even doing anything? Like I'm getting, I'm making money for myself, but I'm not doing anything for community. And so alignment was the thing that I strive toward most. That was what I was more excited about. Like that was, I really wanted for somehow to be able to run a community-centric business. And that is what I've been able to do now. And so for me, I just feel really good knowing that I can operate in all 4 of those A's now, almost 8 years in business, that now all of those things are present, and being okay with knowing that along the journey, some of those A's will come and go.
And I would like to ask you, because that is a big aha moment in terms of you don't get everything at once. And sometimes I think, maybe it takes other people's perspective or direction to kind of, think about those things. I know here at City, we have the Impact Fund. We started in 2020. $500 million goes towards entrepreneurs who are serving underserved communities and other like social causes and challenges. And with that, you receive not only the money, but the support. Right. So, and, the support and kind of the guidance in alignment with those 4 A's that you have. So I would ask, like, in terms of, how did people along the way help you, really kind of recognize or pivot when something was out of line with those 4 A's and kind of how to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, there've been so many people that have helped along my, my entrepreneurial journey. What the group of women in particular that stand out to me the most are my Spice Girls. So, for those who don't know about my business model, I have kind of trademarked the name of my business model as Black and Forth. So, Black and Forth is not just the name of the strip mall that I own; it is also the name of my business model, and it is the idea of going back and forth for Black business owners. And those women that I go back and forth with are the Spice Girls. They are Black women who have their own businesses, and we have this sort of exchange, right? And I kind of struggle sometimes to find the words for it because early on I had a conversation with the Department of Labor's legal department, and they kind of flat out told me that this does not fit any of the 5 employment types that they have, and that's what made me want to create a name for this relationship that I have with these Spice Girls. So they have helped me because one of my biggest struggles, and I think most business owners, especially with the brick and mortar, in the beginning, the hardest part is like overhead. Like, how am I going to pay this rent or mortgage on the space and staff the place full time? And so what I thought to do is, while I'm allowing these folks to come in and do these pop-up shops, I am going to allow other Black women to come in, sell their products on a regular recurring basis, and they can quote unquote work for me. So they are the ones who check you out. They're the ones who answer your questions about spices when you come in, and I don't have to be here. So it was through the support of these women who decided that they would go along this journey with me that I've even been able to sustain my business. And so those are the women I think who have been most impactful. That's the group or the people person who've been most impactful to me throughout my journey.
Thank you for that. And I want to focus on another part of the journey. I know personally, this was something that I could never really describe. And then a few years ago, I saw the definition. I was like, oh, yeah, that's how I feel, is the imposter syndrome, and I think we can feel that personally. I'm a relatively new mother, so sometimes I have it. And also in your professional life, whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, it's just hard sometimes to fight. I'm feeling like a fraud here in this like traditional corporate environment. Maybe you didn't have exposure growing up, or, it's just, there's different rules sometimes for you, and it feels that way. So I really was curious to kind of hear a little bit more on that piece. And, have you ever recognized it in yourself? Like, what points, especially like starting the business, and what were kind of your strategies that you would give this audience for kind of mitigating those feelings when they come up, and also recognizing that they're there?
So for me, I think the only time where I ever felt like there was some like tinge of imposter syndrome was kind of having to explain why a spice shop, right? Like, I'm not a chef. I've never worked in the restaurant industry. I've never worked in food at all. And so there was this like thing where people were like, so what makes you the expert, right? Like, or are you even an expert? And it started to make me question sometimes, like, how am I supposed to, get folks to trust me and trust what I say about spices and food, and I don't have any formal training? So I kind of felt like I don't really fit here. Like, I don't know if this makes sense for me. And so that thankfully did not stay, right? It was a fleeting thought. But the way that I mitigated that was creating my own rules, right? And then also kind of telling that to folks. Like, I've been very clear in my hashtags and my conversation interviews. I am not a chef. I don't proclaim to be one. I'm not trying to fake like I am one. I enjoy cooking. And so I think for me, that the easiest way to overcome imposter syndrome is to say what you are, right? Instead of trying to be what, like, instead of trying to fit into a box, I don't need a box. Like, I created my own. And that's kind of how my tagline, that you mentioned, food is fashion, came about, because I'm not a chef, but I am a girl who loves fashion. And so what I can tell you is that I think you can take risks in your closet and your kitchen, is that you don't have to play by rules, and that you don't have to have gone to culinary school for you to be someone who can explore and play in flavor and fun and have fun with your food and play with your food. And so I think when I started to describe myself in that way and describe what I do in that way, folks weren't looking to me for technical advice around cooking anymore. So I didn't have to like seem like I knew the answers to like what pairs well with lamb. Instead, I've learned to tell people, I don't know. You don't know, I don't know. Like, let's have fun. Let's figure it out together. Like, let's take some risks. Let's try some things. Let's see what happens, because that's what you're going to do when you get home anyway, right? Like, my quote unquote expert opinion doesn't really matter once you get into your kitchen. And so it released a lot of that stress for me by just simply stating, like, you know what, I'm not about to fake like I'm a chef just so that I can gain the credibility of my audience. I'm going to tell people that I'm not, and I'm going to hope that my tribe finds me, and that the folks who trust that, you know, I'm doing something fun and different, and that I am consistently going to learn and educate myself still, will be okay with that.
It's so funny that self-talk and just like saying what it is important.
Yeah.
When I started with my current role, you know, I started as a writer, and then I basically developed into kind of the product of, you know, product manager, developer, like building the actual content products. And, you know, a lot of it, again, you have to say what you didn't know in front of a group of people who knew a lot more than you sometimes. But it has been a really exciting learning journey, because at some point you will be an expert on certain things just because of the exposure and the honesty that you brought to the conversation around, you know, that. So that's really, I think that's a really great kind of, I think, self-talk note for all of us, in terms of kind of the messages we tell ourselves and we tell our audiences as well. Let's delve a little bit into, I know you're an entrepreneur, but again, as we kind of started, you're an entrepreneur, we started talking about entrepreneurship, which is similar, right? So when you're actually in an organization and you're bringing forth that entrepreneur spirit. Obviously, COVID, you know, was devastating for a number of reasons. But one of the, you know, more positive aspects, or kind of knock-on effects, I would say, of it was we saw this incredible jump in innovation and interest in it, right? 24%, according to the Census Bureau, was the jump of aspiring entrepreneurs in the US. There were over 4.3 new million businesses founded in 2020 alone. And then at the same time, within our corporations, we innovated. There was new systems, new people, new opportunities for people to step up and figure out a way, you know, to deliver value in their firms under this new environment that we were doing. So in terms of, you know, what can you speak up to about the entrepreneur, speak to, give advice for someone, right, who's wanting to bring that innovation inside their organization, and maybe perhaps even speak on some of the relationships that you've had with organizations and building your business, and, you know, how can we tap into that entrepreneur spirit?
Yeah, I think that it is always important to bring your full, like, whole authentic self into anything you're doing, right? So even if you're working in a corporation or a nonprofit, wherever you're working, I think that you should always find ways to share a little bit of who you are, right? And sometimes that leads to you creating a new job, a new business for yourself. And sometimes that can just spark a new policy within your organization, or a club, or, you know, like something like you can find a way to insert yourself. But I think the easiest way to answer that is really just to show up as your full self, right? Like, don't hide who you are. I think I meet so many people because we host the pop-up shops at the Spice Suite. So a lot of the folks who come and do pop-ups, they have full-time jobs, and then they come and do their pop-up shop, and they have their kind of like side hustle. And, you know, sometimes I'll ask folks like, oh my gosh, like, I had no idea, you know, I've seen your Instagram. I had no idea that you did it, that you crocheted, or you made hats, or you know, you were a candle maker. And they're like, oh yeah, I don't really, you know, talk about it. I'm like, so none of your coworkers know? And that doesn't mean that you have to sell candles in the break room, right? Like, I'm not saying to try and hustle at work, but like, what is it that you're learning about making candles or crocheting or knitting? Like, what is the skill that you've honed that allows you to be creative, that will help you to do something new and fun at work, right? Because I think that's when you feel most free at work, when you feel like you've added value and people can see your value. And sometimes value comes from uniqueness, and you have a unique skill set that somebody else might not have, but you have to be willing to share it. And maybe you're not comfortable talking about, you know, what you do outside of work at your job for, you know, for various reasons. And you don't have to, but you can still insert some creativity and maybe the way you think, and how you create systems, or how you solve problems, could be evident in your job. And those are things that you've learned through what you do outside of work.
I think that's spot on. I know, as someone who works in a very large traditional company, and did something that was unique, right? Sometimes it felt like, am I doing the right thing? Because it's not mainstream. But I do feel, to some extent, when you just embrace what you're doing and that you're different, it actually has helped further my career maybe faster than it would have on a more traditional path. So I love that you're marrying everything you do in life and not just like compartmentalizing like this is my side hustle and this is my work.
Yeah, I
I'm
was,
very
yeah,
grateful.
I was gonna add, like, even when I was an assistant principal, right? Like, I've always loved to cook. But even when I was an assistant principal, we had girls. I remember we had a group of girls who were fighting two different schools. So I worked at a charter school system. So we had multiple campuses. Across campuses, they're fighting each other on the train. And I said, you know what? You guys cannot seem to get along. You're going to have to see each other every day. You can't change your route home, right? I'm going to make you cook together. So I went to the kitchen at one of the schools on a weekend. I got both groups of girls together and we got in the kitchen and I made them cook and I made them, make plates for each other. And we sat down. And of course, there was not like a magic bullet, right? But that was me bringing something that I love into a workplace in an appropriate way. Like, I wasn't selling dinners at work, right? Like, I found a way to kind of marry what I love to do and make it make sense for my job. And sometimes I think we have to be okay with doing things like that too. Like, there is almost always going to be a way for you to show up at work as your full self, without having to always be mindful of or be scared of what people might think.
And I love it. We're going to write that one down too. You can't change your route home. So, you guys got to figure out the best way to make it home, right? So the last time I want to just pivot a little bit and really talking about relationships. In the corporate environment, that might be like, really specific networks. Like here at Citi, we have Black women at Citi. It's a program. We have different forums that we hold throughout the year. And then also, of course, like if you can't see it, you can't be it. So the representation. And when I think about inspiration for me here, it's like TT Cole was the first Black woman on the executive management team. And she's also now leading the global women's strategy at Citi. It really kind of touches to the importance of like intersectionality. Like, I'm not just a woman, I'm not just Black, I'm a Black woman, and there are different experiences and challenges that come with the intersection of those two. So my last question before we go to Q&A, because we have about 15 minutes left. So one thing that ELC really advocates for is to really, address and dig into your mistakes. Like, you need to fail, right? So failing forward, believing that failure, unexpected outcomes, and even luck can play a part in the innovative process. So we want to know, what was your best mistake? And that can be any scope of your career, from teacher to food and fashion. What advice can you share also from that experience, that just didn't go the way you planned?
So I think my best mistake was probably just starting a business, right? Like, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no business experience. I had no business. I still don't have a business plan. I've never forecasted for my business. When folks ask me, like, where do you see your business in 5 years? I'm like, I have accountants now, right? So they can tell me financially where we'll be. But in terms of like programmatically and socially, like where I want to take my business, I have no idea. And so I don't dwell in that. And I'm okay with not knowing, because I didn't know where I would be now. And I'm super grateful and happy with where I am. So sometimes I think that the reason I don't know is because it is beyond me. Like, it is beyond what I can even conceive right now. So that was definitely the biggest mistake that I've made. The advice that I give folks is always like, start now, perfect later. There have been so many iterations of the Spice Suite in terms of our branding and marketing and messaging. I started the Spice Suite with me buying wholesale spices online. Basic spices, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was just like, I need to put something in these bottles because I told this man I was going to open a spice shop. So I have to open a spice shop, right? And then I started to travel the world. I've been to about 37 countries now, traveling for spices and spice inspiration. And so then I started to bring spices home and I would mix them. I was labeling the bottles. I was writing the names on the bottles, and that was labor intensive, right? And then I finally got to a point where I now have co-packers. And so now I just send them recipes. They send me a sample, they bottle it, they arrive to me already beautifully labeled and ready to go. But I would not have gotten there had I not made some of those like early, like, oops things of like, buying the wrong bottles, because now I know exactly what type of spice bottle I need. Like in the beginning, I was choosing what was fashionable over what was functional. Like I had bottles with cork tops that were cute, but your spices don't last. Like it just, they get really old really quickly. So it was just like my mistakes. I'm grateful that the mistakes I've made in business have not been like huge ones, right? Like I've not made any mistakes that cost me large amounts of money or time or energy spent. But there have definitely been things that I look back at and I'm like, I can't believe you did that. Like you and people were like, sometimes even with the spice bottles, I'm like, you guys were buying spice bottles from me and I wrote the names on it with a marker that didn't even last. Like a month later, you didn't even know what you had. I can't believe y'all trusted me. And so I made those types of mistakes in business. But it helped me to also build my tribe, right? Because it forced me to be honest about my growth. It also forced me to reinvest money into my business more quickly because I knew that I couldn't stay in that space and raise my prices. And I knew I needed to raise my prices to be able to grow my business. So it kind of forced me to level up a lot quicker than I would have had I started out doing this thing exactly right and haven't had it all written out the perfect, quote unquote, perfect way.
And you know what? If I had to sum up you in like a picture, right? It's honesty, because that's like what you did. You were honest about what you wanted to do. You were honest about what you could and could not do. And you were honest about moving forward. And that is, you know, just it's crazy how powerful something so simple can be. But that's just amazing. I would like ask you, you know, you're very, very you're just bright and you know, you move forward and you keep that momentum. What's kind of I guess a last message you would give for Black executives who are having a hard time recovering or figuring out, you know, what to tell themselves when they realize that mistake was made?
Trouble don't last always, right? Like, I mean, I think sometimes we dwell in things, we sit in our mistakes too long, we put too much emphasis on mistakes. I think we also have this mindset, right, that like like something's going to go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't just accept ease, because when things are easy, then we think that like we're looking for the bad things to happen. So I think that we just have to be mindful that whatever happened has happened. It is past tense. It happened already. Like now what? Like how do we move forward? How do we get out of this? What's the next step? And start to like focus or refocus our energy on what we want to do and not what we've done already. Because it can be paralyzing, because then you get scared. And if the mistake was something really big and heavy and hard, then that can also kind of shatter your confidence. And maybe you start questioning whether you can do that thing anymore. But I think the best thing you can do is to keep trying.
Keep trying. And I think in the entrepreneur sense, and then also within a corporation, doing that and being true to your tribe, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot, no, my tribe has helped me off a cliff many times.
Having people around you, right? Like having folks around you who will like repeat your dream back to you. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I think I always tell, like when I talk to young people, I'm like, be careful who you dream out loud around. Not because I believe in this idea of like haters, right? I think that's ridiculous. But in the sense that like sometimes people are scared for you because they can't see for you what they can't see for themselves. And so it's also important to have people around you who can see it for you, who are like, you know what? Black and Forth is going to happen, right? Like I was doing construction, like it was a multi-million-dollar construction project that I financed myself. And it was a lot of work, right? And I was getting frustrated at different points, but I had friends who were like, girl, it's going to happen. Like, look at what you've done already. Even when, you know, we were barely out of the ground and we couldn't see what the erected buildings would look like, they still believed it so much that I was like, you know what? You're right. It's going to happen. I just got to do it. Okay. You know what? Tomorrow, you know, like let me cry today, but tomorrow I'll be back. And so having people who kind of speak life into you in that way, and having a tribe who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself in those moments is so important.
So important. And I mean, that's why we're here today, because ELC is our tribe. So, and our second question, it really evolves around when you were you talked about that point where you were, you know, kind of going from like, I don't want to just be a retail shop owner and I want to actually have a purpose. Like, do you feel that there is some kind of, sometimes you have to kind of take a break from the actual work of the purpose in order to achieve a greater purpose in terms of what you're trying to do?
Not for me. I feel like like I said earlier, showing up as my full self, right? Like I am a community servant. I'm a person who needs to find purpose and meaning in what, what I'm doing, especially if it's something I'm doing over a long period of time. And so I didn't have the time. I didn't feel like I had time to pause to figure it out. Like I had to keep on, Spice Girling while I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to infuse some community, and how I'm going to invite community into my business, and doing one thing to focus on the other. And I think for most people, it works best that way, right? Because then you don't feel like it's a juggle. Then there's like this force, not even force, it feels like the synergy just happens.
Mhm.